Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze Michael Olise's key role that helped Bayern Munich establish a comfortable first half lead in their 4-0 win over Werder Bremen. So before we get into today's video, don't forget to check out our Bayern Munich videos from last week so you could see how Michael Olise played a key role against Chelsea and then focus on how Harry Kane was the key man against Hoffenheim. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, we have Bayern Munich in a 4-2-3-1 with Goretzka and Bischof in that midfield zone just in behind Gnabry. And then you have Sacha Boey playing as a right back with the front four remaining the same. And then when you look at the away side, they often dropped off into a 4-4-2 out of possession. And what we're going to focus on here was that opening half where Bayern Munich had to bypass that 4-4-2. And we're going to focus on how they were able to create chances and then how they were able to ultimately kill off the game down that right hand side within the opening 45 minutes. So what we end up seeing here is that, like I said, Bremen were dropping off into more of a 4-4-2 out of possession, and here Bayern Munich's build-up was somewhat similar to what we've seen this season. Although the base shape would start with the center backs in a 2, you would often see one of the members of the double pivot dropping to the outside of Tah or Upamecano to form a back 3, and then it would be the spare central midfielder holding his position with Gnabry dropping off deeper as well, and then you would see the fullbacks inverting into narrow positions in the half spaces to drag out the wide players. As stated in previous Bayern videos on this channel, the reason why the fullbacks are inverting is to ensure that the other side does get into a more narrow shape, and then it creates passing avenues for the wide players to get on the ball and get them into instant 1v1s. Ultimately, we witnessed different variations of this build-up because both Bischof and Goretzka were capable of dropping to the outside of the center backs to get on the ball. At times, you'd see both of them dropping in towards those spaces on the outside of the front 2 because they were looking to close them down, and that's where you would see Laimer and Boey being a bit more wide and stretching out that midfield bank, but you would still see Gnabry dropping off into the midfield zone as well. Ultimately, in an ideal world for Bremen, they would have their front 2 sitting on Bischof and Goretzka, and then that would leave space for their midfield duo to remain compact in that central area, and then deal with Kane or Gnabry dropping off if they look to move in towards those midfield zones to create an overload. There were times where simply Bayern were just a back 2, and that's where you would see Gnabry and Bischof in that midfield zone, and it would allow Goretzka to push forward to occupy one of those central midfielders, and that's where you'd see Laimer and Boey a bit more wider. And the same could be said if you simply had Gnabry holding his position and then Bischof and Goretzka sitting in that central zone and allowing the center backs to push forward to serve as the breakout for Bayern's attack. So it's evidently clear that Bremen wanted to ensure that Bayern couldn't penetrate through central areas, and even on the rare occasions where they were able to bypass that front 6, when they received the ball in the final third, it was the execution that was poor and they were unable to combine with their teammates successfully. And over on the left-hand side, we rarely saw good combinations between Laimer and Diaz that forced that Bremen side to sweat or forced them to defend desperately. Ultimately, it was about Diaz receiving the ball on the left-hand side and Laimer looking to make underlapping runs and behind the back line. But initially, the issue that Bremen encountered was quick transitions where Bayern were able to win the ball higher up the pitch, and then it was often Olise and Kane breaking in transition where Olise placed Kane in positions where he should have scored, but the first attempt he ended up firing a shot wide of the net, and then the second time from a poor pass he led a 2v2 with Kane, placed Kane in across the 2 defenders, but once again from a tight angle Kane was unable to beat the keeper and he made a key save. But outside of that, Bremen's main issue was down the right hand side where Olise was able to manipulate the ball and he had help from runners, whether it be Gnabry on the overlap, Boey on the underlap, or Goretzka making deep runs from the midfield zone to get into dangerous positions. Now we witnessed different variations of Olise's impacts because he was very patient with his attacking approach, and there were times where he ended up seeing he had Gnabry and Boey with him to help ensure that he could create space, and he'd simply drop the ball off to his teammates, and you witnessed that both on the under and the overlap, and there were times where he simply received the ball in a wide right touchline position, and you would see Sacha Boey making underlapping runs, and rather than playing him in, he was focused on retaining possession and ensuring that Bayern were able to cycle the ball back and towards the left-hand side. And then the other issue that Bayern were able to create down that right-hand side were the overloads. Because they often dropped off into a back three, with Goretzka operating as the right center back, he often was able to play free passes from that zone because Castro wasn't getting out towards him. And what would happen was that the ball would be played out to Olise, and if they didn't have one of their midfielders tracking the runs of Gnabry or Bowie, Olise would often drag one or two players towards him, and then that would leave a free run into the space that he was creating with his presence. There were times where you simply had Olise playing the ball around two defenders for Sasha Boye making a free run in towards the right channel, or you'd end up seeing Goretzka sliding the ball out to Olise dragging away the fullback, and then because neither of the central midfielders are tracking the movement of Boye, what would happen was that Boye would drag away the center back, and that would leave a free run for Gnabry, Kane, or Goretzka to run off the center back into space. But like I said, when Olise placed his teammates in towards these positions, they simply failed to make an impact down that side. The same would be applied for the right back if Goretzka and Bischof held the central position. He could slide the ball around his marker in towards Olise. Olise would drag two players towards him, and then the central midfielders aren't tracking the movement of the right back advancing, and on that underlapping run, Olise could simply play him in, but once again, when he played them in towards those zones, they failed to make an impact. So in truth, many of Bayern's better chances in that opening half stemmed in transition, where Bayern were able to win the ball and then break forward or switch play out to the right-hand side. Initially, you were seeing the right back making underlapping runs, which created space for Olise to cut on towards his left foot, but in those scenarios when that did happen, he was unable to make an impact. And a lot of that stemmed with him having free time to put the ball on towards his left foot and pick out teammates with his crossing ability, but he failed to connect with his teammate. Even when Boye was making overlapping runs to drag markers away from him, when he cut on towards his left foot, at best he was forcing the keeper into easy saves. Similar to the Chelsea game, Olise was at his best when he was operating down that right-hand side in transition and serving as a creator in terms of playing in runners breaking in beyond him. There's a time where he ended up having Gnabry on the overlap, and he dragged three Bremen players towards him and played in Gnabry in right half space, and Gnabry's cross for Diaz simply evaded the left-sided Bayern attacker. If you look to an example of the Bayern overload down the right-hand side, it's Boye getting away from his marker and focus on Goretzka. As Boye slides the ball out towards Olise, you could see that Goretzka's about to make that deep run, and Olise drags away the right back. Goretzka's marker tracks the run late, and Olise simply clips the ball around the two Bremen players for Goretzka to receive the ball in right half space, and he identifies Kane making a run towards the 6-yard area. However, when that ball is fizzed in towards that zone, the center back makes a great last-ditch tackle to ensure that Kane doesn't have a simple tap-in and clears the Bremen line. And then when you focus on the build-up to the opening two goals that killed off the game, they follow similar templates. The first goal follows great work from Gnabry to help Bayern regain possession from a cleared corner, and you can see him making an overlapping run on an Olise 1v1. Olise drags two markers towards him, and he looks to play in the ball towards Gnabry, but Gnabry's run drags away two markers, and that allows Olise to cut on towards his left foot with time and space. And from this position, while he doesn't connect with a teammate clearly, his cross in towards that penalty area is flicked on by Tah, and it deflects off Diaz to put Bayern ahead. And then the second goal identifies the overload, where it's Boye playing the ball around pressure in towards Olise, and Olise drags two markers towards him and finds Upamecano free in that midfield zone, and he has time to now receive the ball and then carry it forward in towards the final third, and he locates Kane making a run into free space down the right-hand channel, and from there Olise places Upamecano in a position where he could find Kane making the run in towards that zone, and Kane does a very good job of receiving the ball ahead of the center back, and then doing a very good job of getting across the ball so that when the center back makes a challenge, it forces him to concede a penalty. So as you can see, where Harry Kane stole the headlines for an historic goal-scoring night in which Bayern remained perfect domestically, the wide rotations down the right side maximized Olise's impact, which played a key role in the German champions killing off the game by halftime.